What you're hearing are the frequencies lost to data compression. Data compression is the umbrella term for the process of making a digital file smaller, or reducing the number of bits needed to store and reproduce an image, document, or sound. When an uncompressed digital audio file, a WAV or aiff, is compressed into an MP3, a huge amount of acoustic information is disposed of. The original recording remains recognisable, but transients and other frequencies are rendered redundant and lost. This video will demonstrate how I've been using these relics as a source material for compositions derived from the duet-like intra-action between uncompressed and compressed versions of the same recording. Through a relatively simple trick of phase inversion, the frequencies lost to data compression can be isolated and listened to as distinct sound objects, separate from either their uncompressed or compressed versions. Hearing these haunting, spectral sounds is like eavesdropping on a conversation we were never meant to hear. They prompt a number of questions, 3 of which I will address in the video's second section, after I've shared some example recordings. 1. To what extent do these recordings reveal the non-human agency at play in the medium through which most of the world listens to music? 2. Since MP3s anticipate how its listeners perceive and perceive for them, as Jonathan Stern identifies, is there any traction to thinking of the embodied listening experience as human-non-human collaboration? 3. And what, if anything, could a collaborative approach that nudges the human from the centre of the listening experience contribute to the debates currently raging around music's political ecology, or the environmental consequences of how we consume music? The relics of compression are well positioned to tackle questions of de-centeredness, as they gather together the frequencies that are usually consigned to the periphery. Let's revisit those 3 questions I posed earlier. The first was, to what extent do these recordings reveal the non-human agency at play in the medium through which most of the world listens to music? Given the popularity of the MP3 over uncompressed formats, these relics, which belong somehow to both and neither format, become a sounding board for reflecting on what we consider to be valuable data in an information age, as well as what we disregard as noise to be tuned out or erased. Noise, of course, is one of sound studies' more overdetermined categories. In preparing this video, I kept returning to Greg Hange's definition of noise as a register of the intensity of relationships. For Hedges, noise's ontology is, quote, only relational, and it does not come into being by itself, but only as a byproduct of expression, end quote. The garbled relics of data compression only emerge when phase inversion gives form to the relationship between two expressions of digital audio. In this moment of expression, the newly actualized interstitial pivot point between two modes of expression strips the audio of their similitude, leaving only their points of departure, or what is present in the uncompressed audio that the compressed audio does not retain. This leaves a not insubstantial amount of noise as relation. I use this word quite deliberately because what's left is truly a register of the intensity of the relationship between the files, as Hedges' definition of noise demands. Paradoxically, however, these frequencies cease to be noise, ontologically speaking, when they move from the virtuality of potential to the actuality of form. As Brian Cain puts it, quote, the moment a phenomenon appears, the moment that the virtual is actualized into form, it veils the noise from whence it came, end quote. I've taken this quotation from Cain's 2016 critique of the ontological turn in sound studies. The article provides a succinct account of the philosophy of sound art and music that Hedges espouses, one that arrives at a distinction between music and sound art that states, quote, only the latter aims at disclosing sound's ontological condition, end quote. However, Cain continues, when an artwork supposedly discloses its ontological condition, we get an imitation of the virtual through the veil of the actual, end quote. This is Cain's problem with the ontological turn. It mistakes the exemplifying artwork for the embodied condition of ontology. Using data compression in composition, I am arguing, unproblematically exemplifies the noise as register of relation between uncompressed and compressed files that, inaudibly, and thus virtually, underwrites so much of what we listen to and how the musical commodity circulates. I hope that using compression as a compositional tool reveals the noise inherent in the processes by which sound is digitized and then made small enough to be competitive under the conditions of the 21st century market economy. The form itself inconspicuously signifies the ontic noise of everyday definitions, as opposed to the always immanent virtuality of ontological noise. Its distorted, fluttering timbre ensures these compositions sound noisy, even if they are ontologically no less noisy than any of the most streamed tracks on Spotify. By granting this noise the form of ontic noise, I want to invite reflection on where this noise remains ontological, hidden in virtuality inside every MP3. My second question was, is there any traction to thinking of the embodied listening experience as human, non-human collaboration? In his 2006 article, The MP3 as Cultural Artifact, Jonathan Stern gives a very accessible rundown of exactly how data compression algorithms use models of how the human ear works, and thus MP3s essentially listen on our behalf. This is where my second question bleeds into my third. What, if anything, could a collaborative approach that nudges the human from the centre of the listening experience contribute to the debates currently raging around music's political ecology? I'm interested in the relative energy intensity of algorithmic agency, or how these codecs listen to floating point audio on our behalf when exporting digital sound into the world as commodities of varying file sizes. The Relic recordings themselves are very small, but they can only be arrived at through processes of compression, which require additional processing time. Hopefully, we can discuss questions of fidelity and the environmental ethics of media consumption in the Q&A. Thank you very much for listening.